This video is about the new symbolism that's coming to light about Osiris rising, who is the Antichrist, who is also Akhenaten. First of all, I'm going to point out how they just changed the Twitter logo from a bird into an X. Most people know that already. The X is a symbolism for Osiris rising, and Osiris is rising, and they're telling everybody that before it happens. Rapture is going to be very soon, and as soon as that happens, everything's going to pretty much go crazy. So they changed this name to X. One thing that Elon Musk is known for is his evil symbolism. If you look on his Twitter profile page, for a very long time, I don't know if it still has it, but it had his picture of him from Halloween wearing the Baphomet costume with the upside-down cross on the back. You might not have seen that because I can't find the picture anymore of the back of it, but it had a humongous upside-down cross on the back with the Baphomet on the front. And he was so proud of that picture that he kept that as his profile picture up until, I don't know if he still has it, like I said, but up until now. If you look at the symbolism in all the celebrities and things that people don't really pay attention to, you see this symbolism. You can see right here on the Pope's cross, he has a picture of Osiris with his arms crossed. And it's a common symbolism that goes through the celebrities because they all worship these ancient Egyptian falsehoods. This is Akhenaten, okay? And if you haven't seen my videos about who is the Antichrist, I'm not going to get too deep into that, but it is all connected, and this is him, okay? And one thing I'm going to point out about this is half Obama's face on there to show how much he looks like him because it is him. And if you look right here, you see the shepherd's hook and the sickle. And what does that represent in the Bible? Because Satan is a great stealer of all things of God. So what is Jesus? He holds the keys of hell and death, and he is the shepherd. Satan has done everything he could to take credit for everything God has done, everything God stood for, everything God is, everything he was. He manipulated it into a way to be about himself because he was stealing God's identity. These are links to the videos about the Antichrist. And this is one article where it was talking about how Obama says, "I am God." And this article from Newsweek where it says he's the God of all things.
This aspect of our strategy was moving too slowly, but the fall of Ramadi has galvanized the Iraqi government. So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces. Including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
I'm going to read a few articles that talks about Osiris rising and him being actually Akhenaten. The first thing I'm going to read is called "Osiris Killed by Set is Resurrected by ISIS." One thing that I can tell you for sure is that Obama is ISIS's biggest supporter. I mean, of course, Satan would be. Okay, that's Akhenaten. Now look at him. Look him in the eyes. That is him. They're all wearing rubber masks and deceptive costumes, and they do it just to be like rubbing it in your face. If you look at this picture right here, you can see, I have an article somewhere about Obama getting a nose job, and you can see this mole right here on his face, and then after his nose job, where is it? Right there. Moved over a little bit, but still there. Why wouldn't they remove the mole, I wonder? But anyway, this is the first article. It says God's rebirth prefigures man's rebirth. The two sides of God during the period of creation are frequently represented by antithetical characters portrayed, for example, by the children of God, or by the wife and brother of God, one representing order, the other chaos. Order of chaos, you know that, right? You've heard that from the evil conspirator cultists, I guess you call them. In an ancient Egyptian myth, that dualism is linked to the season, and God's death and resurrection caused by the two external characters become emblematic of the annual death and rebirth of nature. Egypt in the beginning, Osiris, with all these other names, vegetation god and god of the dead, whose presence was manifested in the sprouting grain and the rising waters of the Nile, invented agriculture, writing, and the arts, and transformed humanity from barbarism to civilization. The goddess Nut, the wife of Ra, had an affair with Seb, When Ra discovered the intrigue, he cursed his wife and decreed that she not be delivered of her child in any month or in any year. The god Hermes, who also loved not, gambled with Selene, and won from her the 70th part of each day of the year added together. These made 5 whole days. Hermes joined these to the 360 days of which the year then consisted. On the first of these 5 days Osiris was born. At the moment of his death, a voice was heard to proclaim that the Lord of creation was born. In time, he became the king of Egypt. He devoted himself to civilizing his subjects and to teaching them the craft of agriculture. And he established a code of laws. When Egypt was flourishing because of his teachings, Osiris departed, going to instruct the other nations of the world. During his absence, his wife Isis ruled the state so effectively that Set, the evil brother of Osiris, could do no harm to the realm. When Osiris returned, Set plotted with 72 comrades and with Aso, the queen of Ethiopia, to kill him. Secretly, he took the measure of the body of Osiris and built a handsome chest. This chest was brought into the banqueting hall when Osiris was presenting along with other guests. So Osiris was induced to lie down in the chest, which was immediately closed by Set and his fellow conspirators, who conveyed it to the mouth of the Nile. The news was brought to Isis at Coptos. Cutting off a lock of hair and putting on mourning apparel, she set out in deep grief to find her husband's body. With the help of children and of dogs, she learned that the chest had been carried by the sea to Byblos, where it had been deposited by the waves among the branches of tamarisk tree. In a very short time the tree grew to a magnificent size, enclosing the chest within its trunk. The king of the country admired the tree, had it cut down, and made it into a pillar of the roof of his house. When Isis heard of this, she went to Byblos, where she was made nurse to one of the king's sons instead of nursing the child. In the ordinary way, Isis gave him her fingers to suck, and each night she put him into the fire to consume his mortal parts, at the same time changing herself into a swallow and bemoaning her fate. But the queen happened to see her son in flames and cried out, and this deprived him of immortality. Isis then told the queen her story and begged for the pillar that supported the roof. This she cut open, then took out the chest and her husband's body. She wrapped the pillar in fine linen and, anointing it with oil, restored it to the queen. The lamentation of Isis were so terrible that one of the royal children died of fright. Isis then brought the chest by ship to Egypt, where she opened it and embraced the body of her husband, weeping bitterly. Then she sought her son Horus in Lower Egypt, first having hidden the chest in a secret place. But one night, Set, hunting by the light of the moon, found the chest, and recognizing the body, tore it into 14 pieces, which he scattered down throughout the land. When Isis heard of this, she took a boat and gathered the fragments of Osiris's body. Wherever she found one, there she built a tomb. Osiris was then brought back to life, and his son Horus avenged the death. The story of Osiris, the dying and resurrected god, is also the story of the land, the Nile, that settles within its banks during one season, only to overflow those banks and fertilize the land during another. This rhythmical movement of the seasons is linked to the annual ritual commemorating the death and rebirth of the god of agriculture. Osiris is dualistic creator god, with Set representing his death-dealing side, Isis is life-giving side. See also Horus, Isis, Ra. The emergence of Osiris cult in Italian peninsula and its main features. A reassessment. Published in April 3rd, 2023. Abstract. The Roman period, the cult of Osiris, together with the Egyptian deities, reached the Italian peninsula through the sea trade. Here, his watery nature was especially stressed. Following ancient Egyptian beliefs, Osiris was identified with the yearly flooding of the Nile, which renewed nature and fertilized the fields. It was used in illustration rituals to bring the dead to life, as well as satiate the deceased thirst. Since Osiris was embodied in the vital fluid, he was perceived as a barrier of life. Far from aiming to collect all the evidences of the cult of Osiris found in the Italian peninsula, the goal of this work is to provide an overview of which forms of Osiris were mainly worshipped there and what role he held in funerary contexts and beyond, throughout the analysis of some of the most relevant sources related to his cult and the examination of the context in which he was worshipped. And I'm just going to read the conclusion to that because I believe it was a very long article. In Roman time, the marked effort of, I can't pronounce that, Syrianization of the Greek-Egyptian religion allowed the spread of the Osiris cult, which was received early in the Italian peninsula. There his watery nature was especially stressed, the aspect attested since the Old Kingdom is developed during the late period and recorded by classic authors. Osiris is the Nile, since the humours that have exuded from his corpse are the yearly flood of the Nile. Throughout the libation rituals performed with his water, Osiris gets back his corporal fluids, completing the revivification process. The restoring of Osiris, with which every deceased is identified, is the religious counterpart of the macrocosmic revivification process. The inundation, a natural event that was ritualized in the resurrection process. These beliefs were fully assimilated by the adepts of the Isaic cults, as this revivifying water took on a special role in the rituals performed in the Italian peninsula during the Inventio Osiris festival, which celebrated the discovery of Osiris' corpse. Plutarch informs us that some priests carried a sacred cista holding a golden coffer, into which the hidden scaredness, as Tibullus calls it, namely the potable water, was poured. A number of Isaac processions or veneration scenes described by classic authors and represented on reliefs and frescoes show some ministers among the ranks of priests with veiled hands bearing or exhibiting the hydria, the 10 books of architecture. It possibly contained Nile water intended as the embodiment of Osiris. The hydria were handled in exactly the same way as the sacred images of Osiris Canopus, one of the main forms of the god that spreads throughout Italy, represented as a full jar, recalling his watery nature. He was usually carried in procession, held only with covered hands, and exhibited in the worshippers for veneration. Therefore, sacred images, rituals, and furniture suggest that Osiris is water. For this reason, the role of this sacred fluid in Egyptian temples in Italy is pivotal, as noted by some authors. It was sometimes drawn from the Nile itself. Afterwards, the Isis complexes were provided with basins, in some cases filled by rain, from which water was drawn to be used during rituals and festivals. As seen at Tivoli, a number of these facilities were found in the so-called Anatolian and were intended to be used in lustral washing. A basin, possibly set within the inner space of the Separariums Extra Excedra at the Campus Martius in Rome, was reserved for the washing and sprinkling over priests and referred to the ritual value of the water and its connection with the cult of Serapis and Osiris as well. A cult was definitely ritual value of the water and its connection with the cult of Serapis and Osiris as well. And a cult was definitely addressed to Osiris with the temple of his Paradra, and Apuleius recalls, and some archaeological evidence proves it. An image of God and 2 statues of Osiris Canopus were found in the neighborhood of the Elysium Campense. A special devotion was addressed to this form of the god, since it was also represented on the reliefs embellishing the shafts of 2 columns belonging to the temple. The subjects shown there hold the same attitude as 2 statues found in Benevento. There are 2 priests with veiled hands, each carrying an Osiris Canopus. The god was the main recipient of the cult who performed in the Canopus, built by the chief Martenses. It was a guild of veterans coming from Canopus that had taken part in the Trajan military campaigns in Dacia and imperil favor for their service. They had the opportunity to settle in the Samnium and to worship the god of their town of origin. In Faesulae, the cult of Isis and Osiris of Caposiris Magna was introduced by 2 veterans as well. Like many Romans who strayed in Egypt for military service, they began to worship local deities for inclusion reasons. Once they came back to their homeland, they continued worshiping these gods, allowing their spread throughout the peninsula. Also, other Egyptian gods, the cult of Osiris, penetrated through the Italian peninsula, mainly thanks to merchant soldiers and freedmen. The 5 so-called cool water inscriptions found in Italy were mainly written by freedmen. The formula involved in these Roman epigraphs show a familiarity with the pharaonic religious tradition, especially concerning the value of water that came from Osiris in restoring the deceased. Therefore, the evidence examined showed that through water which he dispensed, Osiris is perceived in the Italian peninsula as the revivifying god who guarantees spiritual and material fertility with his creative and germinal power and restores the deceased, satiating his thirst and getting back the bodily efflux he lost at the moment of death. These concepts partially retain traces of their origin and show a rooted knowledge of Egyptian beliefs which were selectively appropriate to fit specific religious needs through new architectonic structures, revised ritual practices, and specific forms of cult, Akhenaten and the religion of the Aten. You really need to see all of my videos combined, not every single one of my videos, all my videos about the Antichrist and the signs in the sun, to understand how they're connected and how it's part of how Satan steals God's identity in every way. Like how I was just reading, it was talking about him being the living water, basically. Or little things like how it all sounds like certain parts of how Jesus is actually God, and he's trying to steal the identity. You really should see my Signs in the Sun video. This one right here. This one right here. Because it really makes sense when you put it together about how he stole his identity and called himself the Son on earth. What could the Egyptians have thought of their king as his religion? It is quite clear that the only king and handful of people very close. I'm not going to actually read this whole article, but what you should know about Akhenaten is that he introduced sun worship. And not just sun worship, but worshiping him as the sun being on earth. As crazy as that sounds, because it doesn't even make sense. The sun being on earth. But really the sun, the light of the world, which is God, which is Jesus, is who he's trying to steal the identity of. It's a long article, and I don't really need to read the whole thing to prove my points here. Let me see. That was pretty long. Specifically, Akhenaten identifies himself with Osiris as the son of the Aten. The evidence for this view is chiefly iconographic, consisting of what Grimm and Skogel claim are 2- and 3-dimensional depictions of Akhenaten in the form of Osiris. The rise of Osiris, which is the rise of Akhenaten, aka the phoenix rising from the ashes, is Akhenaten and is Obama. But the point of this video is to show how what most of us know, we are getting very close to the very end. So the reason for the video is just showing that this symbolism that they're putting on Twitter, this X symbolism, is just basically a time marker. Now, a lot of the things they do, it's not just to rub it in your face. It's to tell the whole world of those evil people that this is the time that we're in. Like a lot of the symbolism they use, it is a time marker. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen that movie Witches, where they kind of like call all the witches on the planet and call them to come to this meeting of the witches and they all come and they gather together. Well, this is kind of like a calling to them, or a representation to them of what time it is. So the point is that that's the time we're in right now. That's how close we are. It's almost time to go home.